our viewers from across North America and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room, episode 151 for October the 16th, 2019. I am Wes Fryer, joining you from Oklahoma City, where it is a lovely fall evening. I think the low is going to be in the 50s. And it feels great. We've waited so long for fall this year. And anyway, I'm happy because the weather is nice. But I'm also happy because Carl Hooker is here joining us, and Jason Neiffer. It's his birthday, actually. So happy birthday, Jason. But he is out and about as often he does, I think, traversing the state of Montana, bringing healing to EdTech, distance learning, and virtual schooling, all about there. So, welcome, Carl, back to the EdTech Situation Room. Excited to have you here tonight.
Thank you for having me. And yes, I too am a fall person. Unfortunately, in Texas, we don't really get a fall. It goes kind of summer, and then it just becomes winter. But I do appreciate the thought of fall. So thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. Well, and so catch us up a little bit. You have made some changes in the past few months. What should people know about where Carl Hooker is these days and what you're up to?
Well, after 21 years in education, I have kind of looked at, my wife and I have been doing kind of the side work of me traveling and speaking and consulting. And it just, this last year, we kind of reached a point in many different ways in our life, was personally with our kids and their ages and my parents and their ages. And then also professionally with just kind of where I was going professionally in the district I was working with, plus kind of where I wanted to go professionally with the side work. So we made the choice, and I'll tell you, it's exciting and scary at the same time, but we left the district. And so my wife hates it when I say I'm semi-retired or I'm unemployed. She's like, no, you're not. You're self-employed, and that's it. So now we get to deal with the joys of private healthcare and all that funness. But that said, I'm really enjoying it, and it's been great. I've been working with a lot of great schools, so I'm still connected. That's the thing that always worries me about leaving a school district is not having my feet on the ground. And so actually where I'm at right now is in Chicago, working with a great district called Western Springs D101, and they're amazing. So I was in the classroom today, teaching first graders. So I'm still in it, and still a big part of what I do, but I'm excited for all the opportunities in front of us. So yeah, just kind of taking the plunge, man, and seeing what happens. Always fun with 3 little kids at the same time. So we'll see how this goes. Absolutely.
Well, my wife, I saw, I think, some tweets when your post about, taking the trailer and heading out, and I don't know, there was some, I'm like so TV illiterate actually, but it was a show where they were on the road going place to place. My wife has dreamed of that, so I was hearing about you guys hitting the road in the RV and thought, yeah, that sounds like a great way to start a new season of life.
For sure. And that's our yearly tradition anyway, was always to do what we call hashtag Hooker Trek whatever year. Right. So Hooker Trek 14 was our first, and now it was Hooker Trek 19 this last time. And we did 19 days. We try not to plan it exactly the amount of days, but you're right. It worked out perfect. It was a great transition. So I got to spend a good 19 days solid trapped in a motor vehicle with my family, and we're still, alive and happily married, believe it or not. But I did find out that those things are called paper mache on wheels for a reason, because I got some big repair bills when that trip was done, but it was great to reset and then kind of also recalibrate where our priorities are and kind of think about where we're going forward from here. So I'm excited about the future.
Awesome. Well, we are going to probably have a wide-ranging conversation tonight, but we want to give a little voice to our chat room. So shout out to Don Wettrick, who's joining us on Facebook Live.
Hey, Don.
Cool there. And shout out to Peggy George, our #1 fan out there in Phoenix, Arizona. Wishing Carl congrats. We do want to encourage
Peggy.
Anybody who would like to comment. If you're in Facebook, we'll see those comments here on the side, and same thing for YouTube. And sometimes I can jump over in order to comment back. But this is the EdTech Situation Room, and we are a weekly show that happens generally on Wednesday nights, as we have just started here at 9 p.m. Central, and whatever that means for you in your neck of the woods. We generally talk about recent technology headlines through an educational lens, and we usually have more links than we have time to talk about, which will probably be the case again tonight. But we want to encourage you, if you would like, to go to our website, and that website is edtechsr.com/links, and you can find a Google Doc there, which Carl and I have been populating with some different links and news. And, we make up the rules here. There are no sponsors. There is no money. This is just fun. And so who knows?
Nice.
We may or may not, just follow the regimen. But generally, we're going to end with some Geeks of the Week. And I think Carl's got a couple great ones. And so as the guest, Carl, do you have a particular article or topic you'd like to start with? Or I'm happy to begin. It just what's your pleasure? You're our guest. So.
It's it's interesting. I was just looking at some of the links you posted in there, and also, of course, just chatting with some folks on Twitter and Facebook today, and looking at the news. We're really living in a unique time in history, especially United States history, with what's happening with our president. And I don't want to get too political, but it is interesting to see kind of the reaction. Both the good and the bads of social media is interesting because it does make things happen. It seems like it's happening all the time and it's widespread. But I also find that it gives a voice to a lot of different people. So one thing I've been trying to do lately around that is even with people that I know I disagree with politically, is just try to reach out and talk to them about like, how do we come to a common ground? Because honestly, 80% of Americans are the same and agree on a lot of things. It's just that 20% difference that we have, and how do we get away from this world of divisiveness? So before I came on with you, I was watching, of course, what was happening today in the White House with Nancy Pelosi, and there's a great photo of her just kind of standing up to the president, and all the faces. I mean, it's 1,000 words. The picture's worth 1,000 words, and it was just interesting. So I put that on Facebook just to ask people to caption it, and it's been a wide range of people. I had a history teacher just say, yeah, this is called checks and balances for a reason, and I think it's powerful to see U.S. history happening in real time. So just wanted to give a little disclaimer because it was fresh on my mind before we came on tonight.
Absolutely. And, we've talked on the show quite a bit about the weaponization of social media, disinformation, the ways in which there's a lot of folks, I think, I go, but all of us, Rachel, our sophomore, and Shelly and I are both, at a private school now that is an Episcopal day school. And so on Wednesday mornings, a lot of times we'll go to chapel together. And so the message today was talking about Ellen DeGeneres and former President George Bush, and how crazy it was that social media exploded about how could you possibly sit down and talk to this person and all this. But yeah, we got to figure this out, right? We got to figure out how is it that we're going to have dialogue. And honestly, and of course this is not a political show, we're not just going to talk politics, but we'll touch on some things because technology news does. This is tough to figure out. And I think because of the show and these conversations, I've become, increasingly aware and need to, be sharing with my students. I mean, we got to figure this out. How does representative democracy work in a world where the news cycle, to your point, has become a 24/7 cycle? It's not just, Monday through Friday and people take a break on the weekend. I mean, it is all the time. And technology plays a huge role in that. So I'll segue with that to an article I put under the title of Media Literacy. And this comes to us from the Washington Examiner on October 15th. And the title is Kentucky Video ABC Said Was Slaughter in Syria Was Spread by Turkish Politician. And so we have talked before on the show about the ways in which, especially, I mean, this can happen at any time, but in any kind of a crisis, it could be wildfires in California, it could be, wars in the Middle East. How do we know that a video that has been taken is valid? It was from that location. It was taken at the time it was purported to be taken. And so it is just extremely challenging for those things to be vetted. And honestly, there's a huge responsibility on the part of mainstream media journalists to try and vet that stuff. There's so much pressure to get clicks and get stuff out there, but this kind of thing has happened, will happen again. And so this was actually like at a Kentucky shooting range where they were, blowing up pyrotechnics. And this Turkish politician who has spread disinformation before and false things said, "Oh, look at this, talking about the Kurds having stuff blown up, in Syria." And it was just a completely false video. So, media literacy, we all need it. And it's something, because we all can share now so readily, like almost frictionless sharing on, Facebook for the older generations, Snapchat. We may talk a little TikTok, which I'm not actually, that's one platform I haven't joined at all. But anyway, these different platforms, the virality and the velocity with which things can be shared and spread today is incredible. And so we have some responsibility when it comes to, what is it that we're going to choose to share? And I think definitely what a lot of outlier voices want to do is use social media, whether that's, Reddit, 4chan, other places, and get something at YouTube, moving up enough that mainstream media catches it, and then, things get pushed out even more. So what's your take on media literacy? And is that something that kind of fit within digital citizenship in Eanes, or, kind of how do you see? I know that you are a big champion of digital citizenship as
For sure.
as a presenter. So.
Yeah, I like to use the word digital wellness. But it's really just a nuance in some ways. But yeah, I was, thinking about what you were talking about with the video part of it. And I know you've talked about in previous episodes about the deep fake videos too, the ability to just quickly change videos on the fly to make people look like different people and sound like different people. So I think it's becoming more and more of a higher need. And I don't know when we tie this into schools. A lot of schools I've been working with lately, they talk about, well, we do a month where we spend on it, or we spend a day once every semester on it. I really think it has to be embedded. And so one of the things I've been trying to model lately with teachers, at least when I go into classrooms, is like, even if it's like today when I worked with a bunch of first graders, it was, guys, we're gonna take a picture, but I want you to know that this picture is not going to go on social media. And they kind of gave me this look, and I was like, that when someone takes your picture, you need to talk about when is it going to be posted, who's posting it, asking them for permission. I've been doing this with my kids since they were able to walk and talk, and it's now embedded in them. But I do think it's something that has to be embedded in the classroom. I can't just be, and I love that Common Sense Media has a curriculum, and I just think it needs to continue to grow, and it's going to have to. And if anything that we've learned is don't always follow the adults' lead on this, because we're sometimes the worst when it comes to models for it. And I'm guilty as charged too. Sometimes I've read, not as much anymore, but when I started out on Facebook, I'd see something in like a headline and then read a little clip, and they'd be like, "Oh my goodness, this is crazy," and I'll post it on Facebook, and not even reading in throughout it, going, "Oh, wow, it says research says," but there's no actual link to actual research, or which is always just a bugaboo of mine. I hate it when I see an article that says a study says, but then you don't actually see the study or where it goes to, or is it actually a vetted study, or is it backed by a company that's trying to make money on the study? So, that's some deep level stuff that we have to get with kids, and that's probably older kids, obviously, but just kind of having that kind of thought in the back of their mind when they read something to think, is this somewhere else, and is it posted in different views, right? So yeah, I agree. I think if we're not there yet, it's going to be one of the bigger issues that we're going to be facing over the next several years.
Yeah. Peggy George in our chat room is agreeing about the importance of embedding media literacy across the curriculum and not just having that as a one-shot deal. I just dropped another link into our show notes. And by the way, as we mentioned links, those will get into the show notes that will be for this post that we have on edtechsr.com. I actually was interviewed by Vicki Davis about 2 weeks ago
awesome.
on her 10-minute teacher podcast. And so that dropped yesterday. The title she's got there is Understanding the Deep Fake, a Troubling Trend. I actually pulled up, articles that we've talked about here from, this Chinese app that was allowing you to, put your face on Leonardo DiCaprio and have, your face in different kinds of Hollywood scenes, which is kind of fun, to this Spectre project where this artist in, response to the Nancy Pelosi drunk disinformation videos.
Yeah, I remember that.
Put Donald Trump and Kim Kardashian and then Mark Zuckerberg. If you haven't seen those, and in fact, that's a great media literacy.
That would be a good one.
He makes Zuckerberg say things like, "Yes, collecting all your information and making the surveillance state is what we live for. We are so happy to be, manipulating you and using you, blah, blah, blah." Stuff that he'd never say. But if you're somewhat, I think, critical and paying attention, the surveillance capitalism model is what both Facebook and to a large degree Google as well, although I think Google has been a lot more forthright in giving us opportunities to be able to control our history and turn things on and off. But they're not, without potential criticism as well in terms of how all that works. So,
and that kind of brings up another point, which I know we're going to get into too, about data. But I when I'm talking to teachers and parents and students about digital wellness, a thing that I think they're not worried about enough is actually data privacy and where their data is going and who's using it. And I think we spend a lot of time focusing on screen time, which, it's easy because you can see it and you can monitor it and track it. But I think what's harder to do is say, like, who actually has access to your data. It was interesting. I don't know if you watched the Democratic debates last night, and I know you mentioned Yang before too, but his whole idea of like saying our data is a commodity and we should have a share of it, which is a very outside box thought. But it's true. I mean, companies are using it. I just got to visit Amazon headquarters about 2 weeks ago in Seattle, which is an amazing place. Everybody has a dog, it seems like, which is really a different whole side
Did you
story. I don't
go in
understand what
that new area that's like the biosphere or whatever, those
the
bubbles?
spheres. Yes, we did get to go into the spheres and visit. They have these little areas like called nests that are basically like meeting rooms that are basically floating up above. It was surreal. I'll just say that. But they let us take pictures, which was nice. But once I got into the actual building, it was badge to badge to badge to get to any single floor and anywhere. And I think they're aware of it, and they're actually very concerned. I worked with a lot of folks with AWS, which of course does kind of runs the data servers of just about everywhere in the world. It seems like,
Including our
and
podcast,
so
by the way, we host on Amazon
thank
S3.
you. Thank you, AWS. I do think they're worried about it. And after visiting, and now I've got to visit Apple, Facebook, Google, and Amazon, just seeing the big ones like that and seeing how each of them kind of tackle this. Because Facebook, I don't know if you know this, but they're trying to really push to an education wing. It's a small part right now, but I got to meet with them also a few weeks ago and just told them like, these are the things you're going to have to overcome, obviously. And there's just kind of belief that Facebook is, evil and also easy to share lies. And I think recently, Zuckerberg had some sort of something that he was supposed to pull and or didn't pull because he didn't want to make sure it was a slant one way or the other, even though it was obviously some sort of fake ad. I think he's just like saying, okay, it's just a platform. Don't blame us, which also is a little bit disturbing.
Yeah.
I don't know what you think about all that, but.
Well, identifying bad actors is incredibly challenging. I've referenced before, I think it was in April at the Atlas conference that I shared this filtering the exoflood is what I call the workshop. But we took a look at a great video series that Destin, who does Smarter Every Day, did. The one on YouTube just will blow your mind. The amount of sophistication to the disinformation campaigns, which, some of these are state actors that are in our news talking about, Russia and other, entities, but also non-state actors. And there are incredibly smart people working on this, right? And they are trying to figure this out. And it is incredibly hard when you're in the role of censor some things are going to be over the line, like, oh gosh, here's a live shooting, happening at Walmart in Colorado. Right. I don't think anybody has or New Zealand or questions about that. But in terms of the different disinformation and the ways in which, there is the thing of nothing's new under the sun, right? Because people have been trying, think about pamphleteering in the early days of colonial America, and the ways in which, we've always had politicians trying to smear each other, trying to, get some propaganda. Kind of a slogan. Yeah, it's propaganda. And so anyway, I haven't yet. I'm teaching 5th and 6th grade computer class, and we've called it media and digital literacy, and it's actually media literacy, digital citizenship, and keyboarding. Got to keep the keyboarding in there. We do a little bit, but advertising really lays the foundation for this, and so I'm hopeful. I just was realizing our term is going to end right at the beginning of November. I have about 26. I meet every other day with my students, and it's just not that much time. But laying the foundation for thinking about advertising, the ways in which people are trying to, hack our brains. They're trying to get you to go buy something, maybe to be dissatisfied, maybe to think poorly of yourself so that you go out and buy something else. And anyway, we are the most advertised to generation in the history of the planet. And so I don't think we're doing enough, I would say, in schools, and then maybe even, obviously this varies wildly, but even as in families, we gotta talk about this stuff, and because it's powerful, right? We know that social media is a huge influence. I've mentioned this on the show before that our 10th grade daughter has been exposed to more outlier conspiracy theories, whether it's flat earth or we didn't land on the moon or all this stuff, because of YouTube. And so we got to talk about these things, right? And anyway, it's wild because it's not just 3 channels that are on at night, and we're all kind of consuming at that screen. In general, we've got everybody preferring, isn't that odd, a small screen? Is that true in your house? Do people prefer a small screen versus the big? Or
we're still kind of mixed. So I have a 6, 8, and 10-year-old, and it's interesting because just the other day I was having a discussion with somebody about the fact that the kids don't know what commercials are, right? Because we're on Netflix and we have our smart TV. They each have their own iPad, and of course I've got them all set up with screen time and the right amount of filters, and and still on occasion they'll stumble into something. which is always an opportunity for a conversation. But I say my kids still prefer kind of a larger screen. My 10-year-old did get a phone recently. My parents gave her one of their extra phones because they just switched up to a new iPhone. And the deal was that she has to pay half the plan, so she's paying $5 a month on this $10 add-on line. But it's amazing the responsibility she's already. We spent years obviously building up to this moment. So just the other day, I'll get a quick anecdote. We were hanging out with some friends at a pool, and she actually is really good friends with a girl who goes to one of these non-tech schools. Have you heard of, it's like Waldorf, those kind of schools?
Yeah.
Excuse me. But it was an interesting situation because I saw a bunch of people kind of milling around a little parking lot right near the pool, and my daughter was over there, and there's a couple of teenage boys, and I kind of gave them a look and thought, what's going on? Anyway, later on, it comes to find out my daughter had walked over, and she said that they were filming these girls. And they're like, hey, if you dance and do a bunch of crazy dances in your bathing suits, I'll put you on TikTok or get you on YouTube, and you'll go viral. And so the girls were just starting to do crazy stuff. Let's go viral. And my daughter had said, you don't have my permission, and walked away. And I thought, you just earned your phone, young lady. And she smiled ear to ear. But also, I mean, it made me think, like, what about the kid who's never had any tech exposure at all? In the case of the other 10-year-old who's gone to a non-tech school, or her family doesn't have a lot of tech. And so what's her exposure? And she has had none. So she has no idea, like, oh yeah, I'll just become viral because I've heard that word. So I do think we need to have those early conversations. And you're right. I mean, the ad parts, it's hitting us on all sides. And they do watch a lot of YouTube. So I'm sure there's little pop-up ads. They do this thing. I don't know if you know this with kids, but they watch other kids playing Minecraft on YouTube, which is really strange to me.
Yeah.
I feel like an old man. Like, why are you watching other kids play Minecraft?
My son does too. He's a senior in college. He loves to watch gamers, playing. It's and by the way, there's millions of dollars. We had some a Fortnite winner with walk away with 100 million maybe a month or so ago. Crazy. It's crazy, man. It's a crazy world.
It's crazy. You got a Ninja got like a 7-digit contract, 7-figure contract, which is crazy. I mean, the highest paid gamer of all time. And the scholarships are up to the roof. I think there's like 120 schools now that are offering it.
Yeah, the best friend of our athletic director is taking a year off of Oklahoma State University. He was in that tournament in New York and walked away with 80% of 40,000 because there was 100 people in that tournament.
What?
Everybody got at least 40,000 in his contract with his group, which, by the way, kids are getting exploited, in terms of what kind of deals they sign, but he gets 80%. So that's not a bad haul for a 19-year-old who's pretty good, with his thumbs. So.
Just trying to figure out how to drive still at 19. That's crazy.
That's wild. Well, hey, I'll segue to a related article here. So this is from Reuters on October 4th. We were actually off last week, so we'll have not just last week's articles, but the headline here is FBI director warns Facebook could become platform of child pornographers. And in our last show, the beginning of October, I had mentioned this really disturbing article in the New York Times that was talking about what exponential growth in child pornography has looked like, and how that is something politicians and many people just do not want to talk about and to deal with. But it really is a dark side. This is interesting because in the article, what they're talking about is that where they've been talking FBI-wise about encryption and how we shouldn't do this, and they focused on terrorism. Now, their focus appears to be more talking about, we got to stop child pornography. And they've got some statistics in the article about just tons and tons, because this is the thing about Facebook, right? Apple has been kind of the champion of privacy and encryption and things like that. Privacy. And so there's very, very few, claims that Apple is sending and that it's being obtained because of encryption. And so they're saying as Facebook, transitions over to encryption, they're going to have basically a greatly reduced ability to look into the messages of people and then be able to capture folks that are using the Facebook messaging platforms, to do these, totally terrible and bad things. So what are your thoughts on the whole encryption debate and where all that goes?
It's a double-edged sword. I mean, I remember, wasn't it a domestic terrorist? Was it a couple of years ago that Apple, where they tried to get a cell phone, remember, and hack into a smartphone? FBI ended up hacking into the phone anyway.
Well, they hired an Israeli company, I think, actually to do that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That was the San Bernardino shooter, I think was what that was.
That's right. And it's kind of this whole, it is that double-edged sword of like, we want to have the fine line of privacy, and I was thinking again, back to that debate last night, that there were the companies that were mentioned. It was not Apple. It was Google, Amazon, and Facebook, which made, in my head, was like a glaring omission of one of the largest tech companies in the world. But I wonder if it's because they've been spending so much time really working hard on the privacy part of it. So kudos to them for doing that. But you're right, it's gonna put us in a weird spot. I say us, but I would say more the people out there that have to kind of keep eyes on all these things. They're paid a lot more than you and I are to make these decisions. But at the same time, I think about, where does the moral ambiguity end in terms of what we're watching and what we're watching? When is it allowable for us to kind of peek in on what we're doing? It's funny. We have 3 Alexas in our house, or 4 of them, one in the kitchen and one in each of the girls' rooms, because we use it as an intercom system. And I've had people say, aren't you worried that she's listening in? And it's funny they call her she, by the way, but that's a whole other thing. I was like, it's you have to kind of think about that, but I also think, like, what is she listening into? I mean, what kind of we're not coming up with some sort of nuclear secrets in our house. So part of me is like, I kind of dismiss it, but it is something that is worrisome, and I do think about it a lot. And I think as we start heading down the road of decryption, we're going to have some hardline stances on some of this. And I don't know whose job it is to monitor it, but they've got a lot of money, so they've got to figure out some way to kind of keep us as a society moving forward on hopefully the moral high ground on a lot of these things. And you're right, who sets that line? I don't know, but I feel like child pornography is a pretty hard line, and domestic terrorism and self-harm and those things we have to kind of keep an eye on in a lot of ways.
Well, and we need to fund. That's like we talked about this in the last show, but like we are not funding to the degree we need to nationally. The law enforcement folks that are literally standing at the wall. I think of Jack Nicholson, in A Few Good Men, right? When he was like that passionate, you can't handle the truth.
The truth.
Like, yeah. I don't want to know the truth. Like, even to read that article is just a really, you can feel defiled, just like having words, describe some of that stuff. But, so we've got an important mandate, I think, to be funding our law enforcement officials and people who are defending us. There's a real cost to that in terms of PTSD. I mean, and actually our daughter, who's here on fall break, she's majoring in digital forensics and taking computer science. And she just spent time with somebody in our local Edmond Police Department, a woman, who is responsible for policing some pretty bad stuff on the internet. So anyway, that's weird how that's now kind of a personal thing, like thinking, okay, Sarah, is that something you want to do?
And I think and when you talk about funding, I think it goes in the other direction too. And we need to also be funding mental awareness, mental health. I mean, think about the proactive things we could be doing, because some of these people are, especially in the case, I was in El Paso. I left El Paso 30 minutes before that shooter opened up on that Walmart. My wife and my family and I were right across the street, staying at a hotel, and we'd gotten up and just, if we'd have made a different decision to stop and grab something before we hit the road to Austin, we would have been in that Walmart with that guy. And I think about how close that was to us. And I started thinking, this guy, it's something going on in his head. And you look at, there's some commonalities between all these people. And I wonder how much we've lost in terms of mental health awareness. And we started kind of really cutting back on that. My dad worked for the Federal Bureau of Prisons for 25 years, and it's a growth industry. He told me that. He's like, they just keep popping up more prisons. But what are they taking out? They're getting rid of the mental health facilities, getting rid of that kind of awareness. And hopefully some of this will bring some of that to light. I think that's another part of it. I don't want to get into the gun debate, because I know that's you can't really win either way on that one. But I do think that everybody agrees that mental health is always something we need to keep an eye on. And maybe that funding part, like you're saying, helping law enforcement out, but also having that mental health backing with it as well. Not only for the people that are committing these things, but you're right, for the people that are having to go through and find this stuff. I mean, that's a lot to handle as a person.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's back to what we were talking about with policing and trying to find the bad actors, and how many people are being commissioned, how much they're being paid, and whether they're the, low end of the food chain. So 2 connections on that. One is that, when we think about schools and innovation, I just had a chance to spend a couple of days out in Longmont, Colorado with Scott McLeod and some really super innovative folks putting together a innovation leadership certificate, a 12-hour certificate. We were like doing this design sprint. Anyway, one of the things I'm very excited at our school that we are are working towards is the idea of having some intersession innovation time, like between
Oh, wow.
the first and second semester, and some different independent schools do this. And I think this would be a fantastic thing for public schools to figure out too, right? You got to change the schedule, which is kind of like, moving a mountain. I mean, seriously, I know people who've been
Still
fired.
based on the farmer schedule. Yeah,
I know, but I know superintendents in Kansas that were fired because they had the audacity to, change the schedule. But this idea is, you've got some time for autonomy and creativity to do multidisciplinary. And my connection is to surveillance, right? Wouldn't that be a rich, week, 2 weeks, if you could have some time to dive into these issues and then really challenge students? Of course, I'm thinking high school kids here primarily,
Sure.
but diving into these issues and grappling with them, because these are tough issues. And my other segue here, my wife is the real Trekkie in our house. I was a big Star Wars guy, and she's big Star Trek. Like, how do we get to the Star Trek governance model, right? I mean, this model where we're not just, hey, let's go exploit and, take all the resources we can from whatever, asteroid or planet we come to. But, that, I think that's kind of an ideal that I'm trying to think of his name, Gene Roddenberry, set up with Star Trek. But seriously, like, we need to figure out how we can, have governance work not only with social media and all of this, but with the tools that we have available. It's just, and then surveillance, right? Because the pervasiveness of surveillance is crazy today. We're making personal choices in our homes. We're actually a Google Home family, so we got like 4 of the home minis, and which, by the way, I don't know that we have an article. Hey, why don't I segue to an article?
There you go.
Under Google, everything Google revealed at its big event. This is from Mashable on October 15th. Generally, I've heard just kind of underwhelming. Like, even with the Pixel phone, there's some more advanced.
They put 4 cameras on it or something just to run up that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, some of that is just we're continuing to see the iteration of technology like that for consumers getting better and better, but we're making choices in terms of smart speakers, what company do you trust, et cetera. But we definitely have some stuff to grapple with surveillance. That's actually kind of a light bulb for me. It's one of the fun things about, talking about issues like this, is it makes you, think about, well, what would this mean for schools? And hey, if anybody listening to this already has some kind of a unit that you're doing about surveillance, whether you're, you could bring this into English, having kids write, persuasive yay or nay. Encryption, this is a big deal. Facebook is on the brink, I'm pretty sure, of flipping the switch, of turning that on. And that's going to have a big impact for law enforcement. And we need to figure out how we can remain safe as a society, I think, and then not basically give up all rights to privacy. Every civil rights movement that has happened in the history, I think, of the planet has involved people having conversations that needed to be private, because if the government of that time and circumstance had the complete ability to listen in on everything that was being said, Dr. Martin Luther King would not have gotten as far as he was, of course, before he was shot. Mahatma Gandhi, you can just go down the list. So have you heard of anybody doing a surveillance kind of unit or trying to tackle that in a K-12? I don't think I have, actually.
I haven't yet. I am going to link to, this is a fpf.org. I don't know if you've been aware of the Future of Privacy Forum, but they're doing a lot of great work. They're actually, it's a nonprofit that is doing a lot of media literacy just around the privacy sector of things, and not just with schools, but they're of course in schools. And I came across them doing some work with Future Ready Schools, and I was just really impressed with the work they're doing and kind of how they're connecting and looking at data breaches, but also just surveillance, and what does that look like? When I was in, I got the opportunity to go to Australia a couple of times and work with Kathy Hunt and their schools down there. Amazing teachers. But her brother-in-law is actually, and I'll see if I can find his website, but Troy Hunt is one of the global leaders when it comes to actual data privacy. He does all over the world on it, and he did an interesting talk with us. And this is a bunch of teachers, mind you, but talking about which companies are the ones that are actually doing a lot of work. Like the bigger companies, he said, aren't the ones you have to worry about as much. It's these smaller companies that are creating things like a teddy bear that responds to you with some sort of algorithm, and it's made by some little company in China that doesn't, they're basically capturing, you could hack into it and hear what kids are doing in their bedrooms or what they're talking about, and all that information is tracked. He said Amazon and Google, you said those companies are so huge, they're going to spend a lot of time making sure your stuff is safe, obviously. But it's those little third-party companies, those are the ones you got to watch out for when you're buying those little toys or the little kind of fake Apple Watches. And I thought that was pretty profound, because someone did ask them, like, what do you think about Alexa or Google Home? And like, isn't that evil? And he just said, it's not as evil as you think it is. You just have to be aware that there is the opportunity for someone to capture that. But he goes, those companies are going to protect that data as much as they can, because it would blow up in their face if that got out, So yeah, I put a link in there for the FPF.org, which I think is good. It's got some great, they have something called the, on an educational note, they have something called the FERPA Sherpa, which is a different website, but I love it because it's just about apps and companies that are using third-party data, and which ones are doing a really good job of kind of monitoring that and have signed on to these data privacy agreements and which ones haven't. That's a big hot button issue in the tech leader world. I know that we talk about it every time I do one of the Future Ready forums. So I went and dropped those in there too.
Absolutely. I know that Bill Fitzgerald, who's Funny Monkey on Twitter and works for Common Sense Media and heads up their privacy initiative, Susan Bearden also has posted on that FERPA Sherpa, and these are hugely important issues. So let's see. Why don't we talk a little bit? Let's talk wellness.
Transition to something a little more fun.
Well, you know what? Hey, with all these things, we could
we're getting pretty deep.
We could just go deep into it. But so let's talk a little bit about wellness. I know that's a big topic for you. The link I dropped in here was actually a Note to Self podcast episode, which that has gone walled garden as a podcast, which I'm kind of bummed. And Jason's talked about it, like, because he's subscribed, but I don't know if he's. Anyway, we found some. I stumbled across some statistics. We did a podcasting conference with Story Chasers about a month ago. China is having huge ad revenue and just revenue through, and it's actually not ad revenue, it's subscription revenue from podcasting, because their model is not open. It is a subscription-based model. And so there are definitely folks that want that, they want that to happen. Even the purchase of Gimlet Media and Anchor by Spotify, is like, okay, are we going to try to just bring all these podcasts, within this walled garden? And what are we going to do? But this article, or it's actually a podcast, it's called Why Everyone is Talking About Digital Minimalism. And so I'll just give a little summary here and then see what you think, Carl. But it is an interview with Manoush Zomorodi, who is the hostess of the fantastic Note to Self. It's a WNYC Studios production. And she's interviewing Cal Newport. And a friend of mine, shout out Eric Ebert, who is our computer science teacher at school, has talked to me about Cal's book, Deep Work. And before the show, we were reflecting a little bit on interruptions and differences in not being, directors of technology and EdTech and things like that, because the Deep Work book is saying, we need the capacity in this world of knowledge economy to have long periods of uninterrupted thought and problem solving, and just not, having the world ping in on us and interrupt. But this podcast references that a little bit, but it talks about digital minimalism. And so he has never had a social media account and is really an outlier, I think, with respect to technology. I have transformative learning experiences basically on a daily basis because of my connection with social media. I mean, my opportunity, I think of it as hanging out with brains, right? Because anytime I want to see, hey, what's Carl been doing lately? You're a generous sharer, and you have different links that you share, things like that. Podcasts, and of course, I can get tired of it too. I love to go camping. We were 2 weeks off the grid this summer, which is the first time since I've been connected, I think, that I was 2 weeks mostly disconnected, right? We had to go into town to buy some food, and we did turn on our phones. But anyway, I think his digital minimalism, what it really has me thinking about is, is creativity and wellness. One of the things they talk about are some companies that were requiring employees to take 1 day off a week. We're talking during the work week, to basically just be able to think and process stuff and not have your email, coming in to tell you to be interrupted. And I know one of the personal struggles I'm dealing with right now is because I got to write. I mean, I've got books to update, and I've got new books inside me that I got to write. They don't write themselves. And so, what do you think about all that, Carl? Is there anything to that as far as interruptions and wellness and all that stuff?
I think you could take the word digital off of it. I think we need to start striving for a little more minimalism in general. And I think I was reading an article last night. It was a random, of course, on Twitter because I fell prey to the black hole myself, about how Russia tried to do this thing where they had an always going work week back in the days of Stalin, where essentially they would take workers and say, okay, we're not going to have a 7-day work week. There's no more weekends, and we're going to rotate. Each group is going to take a certain day off. If you're the purple group, you have this day off, and so on and so forth, so that they're always working all the time, all productivity. And of course, everyone just totally, that people just blew up in everyone's face, and everyone got burned out. Well, there's talk now that we're kind of facing a similar circumstance here, because now even people like me who are working just on our own, there's also when I'm side jobs, okay, well, maybe I'll go work for Uber on the side. So there's never actually any downtime whatsoever. We're overscheduling our kids, we're overscheduling ourselves, and it's getting to a point where it's like we just don't see our friends anymore. It just becomes harder to be with your friends. And my wife and I, we went camping this weekend too, actually, and we're talking about the idea that maybe we should have. We joked about the day after Thanksgiving having a Friendsgiving, and just like putting it on the calendar now because it's 6 weeks away. That way our friends can say like, okay, yeah, I'm not too busy then. But we become so busy just in general. That's a big part of it. The digital part does, I agree, it does have something to do with that. And I'm somebody who turns off all my notifications. There's only one person that can text me that I'll actually see it or get an alert. And she's the most important person in my life. She's probably watching this right now. I love you, honey. That said, I do think it's important that we turn off some of those things. And when we want to actually get into deep work, I don't know if you're this way, but when I'm writing books, like I find that I need to listen to some kind of rhythmic music. I go to a really kind of weird looking coffee shop that's not very comfortable. I get into that creative space and I just start jamming out words, but everything else is off. I'm not checking Twitter. I'm not checking my email. It's just, I'm in the work and I get in a really good creative zone. And I do think that as students, we need to also teach them how to do that as well, how to turn off notifications when it's time to plug in. Not everybody likes music, by the way. I mean, some people want complete silence. So I think it's just another skill we need to teach in that executive functioning skill of like how to actually keep away the distractions and just focus on what you're doing. I do like that focused work. And Manoush, by the way, she came, I don't know if you know this, but she was our keynote speaker at LearnFest this last year at Eames. Yeah, I know.
Oh my gosh, wow.
She was a great get. And she was amazing. We got to have a good conversation. For fun, I knew that she doesn't watch Game of Thrones. So I, of course, asked her on stage about some Game of Thrones. Like, how did she think of the ending? And she just gave me the funniest answer. It was funny. She's like, oh my gosh, that show. But she wrote the book Bored and Brilliant, it goes a lot to the fact that if we have some time to be bored, we're also going to be more creative. And I do see that still with our kids and ourselves. If you can just kind of sit and stare, I've started challenging adults to do this. Like when you go into an elevator, don't take out your phone. Just stand in the elevator with a bunch of other people on their phone and just smile at them. Now they will think you're kind of creepy, but it's a fun little challenge. Or you go to an airport or you go to the dentist's office, don't do anything and just sit. And even if it's just 5 minutes of quick like reflection and meditation, it's made me so much more productive to have that 5 minutes every day in my life. And I think it's just something that everyone needs, whether it be with prayer, whether it be with meditation, whether it be with whatever. Every person's different. I think just having that moment to reflect does add to that. And minimalism is a big part of that. And that goes not just the digital side. So a very long answer, sir, for that question.
No, I knew I could toss that one to you, and you'd have a few things to say. So our golden retriever here is coughing next to me. So, all right. Well,
that was an adult cough. That was good.
No,
that's a dog.
It's our dog. Yeah, she's now on some antibiotics, so we're not exactly sure what it is, but she was just at the vet. Okay, let's get a couple kind of different ones. This is a sign of the times. I put this in the show 2 weeks ago and didn't get to talk about it. Headline: Men hack electronic billboard, play porn on it. This is Ars Technica from October 1st, and this happened in, I thought it was Illinois. Detroit suburb of Auburn Hills.
Oh, Dearborn. Yeah.
Police are trying to find two men who broke into the control room of an electronic billboard in the Detroit suburb of Auburn Hills. The men caused a pornographic video to play on both sides of the billboard, which is located next to Interstate 75 around 11 p.m. Saturday evening. Videos of the billboard quickly began to circulate, and basically it was up there for about 20 minutes. So anyway, I've wondered, I've heard of like the text only, construction ones getting hacked and goofy things being up there. But yeah, here we are in the days of full screen motion video on billboards, and guess what hackers are going to do. So I'm expecting you probably haven't seen anything in your travels like that, have you, Carl?
I've never seen that billboard, that's for sure. But it's interesting because one of the links goes to the social media post, and I wasn't even looking at the post itself, but I started scrolling to the comments, and it's amazing how many people are like, "This is awesome," or "This is great," or I give credit to so and so. But then someone else actually says, "I think that guy," because they took a picture, I guess, with a security camera or something, of the two gentlemen walking in with hoods on their heads, and one person said, "Wait, I think that looks like so and so." So they actually tagged somebody on social media who I wonder if they got caught later because of it. What an interesting. I don't know where to go with this, but I mean,
Yeah.
obviously,
Well,
when you start having a connected world, you're going to have more opportunities for this with the electric billboards. Or,
right.
I mean, we've talked, I don't know, at length about autonomous cars and the fact that that's great, but what if someone hacks into them? I mean, there's always going to be. Think about technology since the beginning of time, right? If you carve something on a cave wall, there's some general need that there be some nudity into it. If you think about photographs and cameras when they first came around, one of the very first things people did was take like nude photographs. It just seems like technology is always tied to that kind of world, and we live in a very, this country especially is very, kind of a Puritan based country, so we take pornography pretty heavily. So seeing something like that is kind of alerting, but also like I doesn't surprise me. I mean, it was only a matter of time.
It's a sign of the times, right? These kind of things
Totally.
are going to happen. Let's see. I think you dropped in the John Oliver article. You want to talk about that one?
Yeah, I think this goes out to a shout out to Rebecca Rocco, who's on my Facebook feed, and she had posted it. I watched it originally, and when I dropped it in here, I didn't realize it was from several years ago. But that guy, I love that show. It's Last Week Tonight by John Oliver on the on HBO. And he does one episode a week.
Not really a safe for school. So if you're going to watch that, probably do that at home, right? Yeah.
He does drop some language, but one of the things I like that he does that I don't see other people in this field and the late night talk show field doing is he'll ask very very direct questions about things, but then also he'll do something about them. So in this case, he spent a 20-minute bit really going into the length of which people are in debt, not just college debt, but in this case, medical debt. And there's companies out there that are basically preying upon these people and saying, for pennies on the dollar, I will buy up all this debt, and then I'm going to attack all these people and try to get their money from them. So banks are selling it to them because like we're not going to make this money back. So can you give us in this case it was $60,000 to buy $15 million worth of debt. And so what he did is he just spent a little bit of time and research on it, and $50 later he was able to get set up as one of these companies. He called it it was like Credibility After Reliable Protection or something, carp, which is a bottom feeding fish. So he's a bottom feeder. He even made light of it. But then what he did is amazing. He went and he actually, within minutes of setting up his website, someone reached out to him and said, "Hey, we have $15 million worth of debt. We'll sell it to you for $60,000. And it was in Texas, and it was about 9,000 people that owed tons of medical debt that they were never going to be able to pay back. I mean, it was like one of the ladies, I think her husband had fallen ill. And after 4 days with a respirator in the hospital, the hospital's like, "Hey, you owe us $80,000. And she's like, this is how my life is going to end. I'm going to be owing hospitals for the rest of my life." So he went in and did something amazing. Like he forgave them all. So he just decided, I'm going to buy it up. And then he went to a nonprofit who buys up some of the debt as well and said, let's go in this together, and forgave all 9,000 people of their debt, which he says, and I think it's true, was the largest ever giveaway in the history of television. Because Oprah's car moment was like $8 million in cars. Remember when she goes, "You get a car and you get a car." And they added it up, and they said they figured at that moment it cost about $8 million for her to do that. And they said, so he essentially just spent $15 million on clearing everyone of their debt, which I thought was just an awesome way to do like not only talk about what the problem is, but also say, let's do something about it just to make a little dent. That's what I love about his shows. But you're right, not necessarily safe for work.
But yeah, we've talked about it before, because the FCC, when they got overwhelmed with comments, it was really attributable to him, who was calling, on his followers, "Hey, let's do something about net neutrality." And so there's, a lot of ways in which, and I think this is something, let's tie it to digital citizenship, like student voice activism, how we responsibly use our voices and we advocate for the good. That is a hugely important thing for us to be, talking with students, and not just talking about, but doing. So I think there's some great modeling.
Well, think about Greta Thunberg, the young 12-year-old who had the climate change activist, who's really overnight sensation, and whether or not agree or disagree or whatever with climate change, again, that's a whole nother thing. But the fact that she was able to kind of quickly raise a voice and put herself out there with a lot of her own backing. I mean, she got a boat to get over here. I mean, all the things that she did to get here, it's just an amazing story. I do think a lot of this falls on them. You were talking earlier about surveillance and teaching kids about these things. I think they hold the key to all of our futures, obviously, anyway, just based on their age, but also they're going to have to make a decision about climate change, a decision about how much data is too much data that we're giving away. And I think it's getting to where, unfortunately, and going back to the minimalism conversation, we're kind of taking away some of their childhood because we're kind of forcing them into these decisions, making them grow up faster than they probably should be in some ways. And I'm hoping that it swings back to where there's a balance of fun in there too for them. But I mean, you're talking about, I mean, we're impressed with the kid who's 19 years old, like you're saying, that creates a company and can do these amazing things. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, 19, I was still just kind of having fun and figuring out life. I think there has to be some balance of that in there too, to go back to that other conversation. But yeah, it's a bugaboo, tying it all together.
Absolutely. This is all under the miscellaneous tag, so we're just going to kind of jump around here. But this was one I just read tonight. T-Mobile and Sprint get FCC approval to merge in 3-2 party line vote. And this was Ars Technica today on October 16th. We have talked about this one a bit. Again, not just taking it from a political standpoint, but technology as well. Like, it's a big deal as far as access, right? Universal access, and I worked for AT&T for 2 years and learned a lot about E-rate. And government regulation has been a hugely important thing in our nation's history, electrifying the country, bringing electricity to everybody, and then also bringing phone service. And so it's been interesting because in not that long, it hasn't been for that long. Now the telcos have been able to say, well, you can get cellular service and therefore we don't need to, bring that phone line to you, but high-speed internet. And so this all ties into 5G. So, I mean, I'm a T-Mobile customer. I've been very happy with them. If you read this article, what the Democrats, who were the two dissenting votes in this FCC vote, and by the way, the Justice Department has cleared this, but there's still a state's attorney general lawsuit that they have to overcome. Basically, it's going to allow T-Mobile to subsume Sprint, and their argument has been, to compete against AT&T, Verizon, we've got to be bigger, and this has got to happen. They're promising that we're going to have more rural broadband. 5G is going to go out faster, and it's going to go out to more people in the United States. So from a digital divide standpoint, that sounds good. But the quotes in this article by the Democratic dissenters are saying, with pharmaceutical companies, we've seen, charged by the bag, smaller seats, higher prices with pharmaceuticals. They're saying in general, what we see is, fewer players, in the marketplace, worse for consumers. So where have you all been, I guess, as a family with regards to cell phone plans and all that stuff? And then as far as what T-Mobile is one.
Yeah, I never for really big monopolism, and I think if it is the merging stuff, it kind of bothers me somewhat. We're a Verizon family. We have been T-Mobile. We were Sprint. We've kind of gone all over the map. I don't think we've done AT&T yet. And then my parents are on what they call it's called consumer cellular. It's like, I don't know, fly by night, you buy it at the mall type cellular, but they like it and it's cheap and it works for them. So I do think there are some companies that crop up because of it. But when you're talking about schools and where that falls in with the E-rate, it's kind of interesting. And I can't remember the school. In fact, he actually wanted to keep it sort of quiet, but because he was worried about the backlash that would happen if I got out publicly. There's a school I was talking to just a couple weeks ago who parlayed this little rule there's something called band 41. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's basically a frequency band where most cellular carriers carry it. And it's a pretty large amount of bandwidth, and it handles tons of data all over the place, but you can patch into it. And what he was able to do, his school district was able to do, is they won basically kind of a lawsuit to say, we want to patch into this band 41 for our students. So people at home that don't have access can kind of piggyback on this band. So it's pretty much everywhere every cellular network in the world is. Doesn't matter what your carrier is, you can kind of tie into this band. And they were able to do it for almost nothing, which really just blew my mind about where we're going to be heading with, even because I was talking to him about WiMAX, which is basically 2 mile wide Wi-Fi ranges that the military uses. And like, is there any application for that? And he said, why even bother? Because if you can tether to this band 41, essentially everyone in your community can have access to it. So they're basically routing through it and then going through the district server, filters to make sure everything's appropriate on that end. And I kept asking, like, can you give me more information? And he was afraid. Honestly, he told me he was afraid because he thought the cell phone companies were going to get mad or find out or send hackers his way, basically as a way to kind of say, we don't want anyone else to know about it. So there's nothing publicly about this, except for the fact that I'm saying it now, but I didn't say his name or his school district. But if you do a little research there, those of you out there in the tech world, I think it could be the key to unlocking the big gap that we've seen when it comes to I mean, a lot of people have cell phones now in their home, so it's not as big a gap as it used to be. But the idea that there's still this idea that not every household has some access to that. So it's a kind of a weird steer from where you were going with it. But I remember when you brought it up, it just triggered that memory in my head. I was blown away with what he described to me, and it does work because everybody in his district has access to internet just because they're on this global band.
Wow. Hey, I apologize. I guess my connection was getting wonky and pixelated there. Peggy was pointing that out. Am I better now, or is it still messed up, or was it okay for you?
You were getting a little pixelated for a little while. I thought it was me, so I started turning. I had too many tabs open, looking at all the links and stuff.
No, it's probably my girls. Like I've got all these people streaming. I've got my Google Wi-Fi
on Netflix.
Supposed to. Yeah, I know that used to be quality of service at our house. I would shout before the show, "Everyone off Netflix!" Now I've got the Google Wi-Fi with this prioritization. I'm supposed to give myself the quality.
Throttle it down. There you go. Yeah.
So much for that. Well, we are getting close to the top of the hour, and so Peggy says it's still not great. You know what? I'm going to let you go first with Geeks of the Week. I'm going to mute myself and invite everyone to stop using their internet at my house. So, what do you have for us for Geek of the Week?
All right, go yell at them while I go through the Geeks of the Week. So for me, my Geek of the Week, two of the things I posted in there. One comes from a good friend of mine. This is Brett Selekis in Australia. And he is doing a lot of great work down there with the Ministry of Education. And one of the things he shared with us recently was this Learn with League. And one of the things we talked about very early in the show was the idea between esports kind of becoming this bigger thing. And so what I love about it is it talks, I went in and clicked on the link and I looked at the video and kind of watched a little bit about it. And the idea that kids that aren't necessarily in athletic sports now are starting to find these places where they have the connections and bonds to a very big audience. And it's not, it kind of goes into detail about the stereotypes around gaming, which is like you're very antisocial and you stare at your screen. What they show is a complete opposite of that. If you ever watch any of these big gaming conventions where, like the one you were talking about, where they basically won all these big prizes, that's a very loud audience. There's people screaming. There's teamwork happening on the fly. One thing I learned that at a recent tech and learning event was there are schools in Texas that are doing this now, where they actually have leagues that are starting out. It's not a sport yet officially by the UIL, but there are teams that actually do something called smurfing, which I've never heard of. But essentially what they do is they create a false account, another avatar, and they go in and they play against some of these other teams as somebody else, just to kind of catch their tendencies on how they're playing League of Legends. And I was like, man, there's some next level stuff happening here with 16 and 17-year-olds, again, with the idea that they are part of a team and it's a collaborative effort. Now, some people, again, will say like, oh, they're just staring at their screens too much and it's awful. But I do think it's neat to see that some of these kids have a place and they're part of a team. And I just thought it was a neat thing. So I linked to it in there, and it's really about high schools in Australia, but hoping that it comes to more of the States in the future.
Awesome. I think you got one more too.
Yeah. The other one, the Nebula capsule, this is more of a geeky item. And it was one that I did get a shout out to Matt Hawley at Lubbock Cooper ISD out in Lubbock. And he showed me this at his house at first. And it's just a little, I don't think I have it with me, but it's about the size of a Coke can. And I've been looking for a mini projector for my entire life. I was like, I can't find one that really has good quality visual, screen, lumens, and all of that. And this one I found, and I got on Amazon Prime. I think it was like $250. So I bought it. And I was like, I'll play with it and see what it is. So it's got built-in Netflix and Hulu. It also has built-in AirPlay, which is powerful if you're coming from, like in our case, an all Apple house or an Apple school, for example. It does have an HDMI connection. So if you have Chromebooks, you could plug straight into those. 2.5 hour battery life. And so I started just kind of tossing this idea around. And one of the teachers I work with in Western Springs, Dave Roberry, is a 7th grade math teacher. He was like, you know what I've always wanted to do is I wanted to set up stations in my classroom where kids could actually do some small group work and project on the white surfaces around the room. And so what he did just recently is he got 4 of them. So for $1,000, less than the cost of a single projector, big time smart boards, which cost $3,000 or $4,000. He basically set up 4 of these little things, and then when there's time to do group work, he has them kind of move their desks over and they project in 4 different corners. He stands in the middle of the room and can kind of see each of the kids kind of working things out using these little Nebula projectors. I thought, wow, that's kind of next level, and it's pretty neat. You can project it on any surface. There's no zoom. The zoom is you move it back farther from the wall. So still fairly rudimentary. I think the newer one's out. It's like the Capsule 2 is like $400, a little more expensive, but good quality sound. It looks like a little Alexa. And anyway, I thought I'd throw that in there because it's a fun little geeky gift and great for, I got it as a gift, but I didn't realize the classroom applications until I saw it in Dave's room just today, actually, here in Western Springs. So it was, I don't know, potential there for schools that are looking for inexpensive ways to have more kind of display surfaces and kids to present their information.
Absolutely. I was just commenting to our son, who I got to see this last weekend out in Colorado, that we were in a bookstore. It had 150,000 books, and I love bookstores, and the
Yeah.
process, like, how do you discover new things that you're going to read and with filters? And I said, someday at my house, we're going to have a whole wall. It's just going to be nothing but projection. And what I want is to be able to, and of course, AI, this is a weird thing, right? Netflix doesn't let you just see what your friends are watching, because they know if they watch your habit patterns and use machine learning, they can actually do better with what they think and predict you're going to want to watch. But anyway, just being able to see, books and videos and things, content basically that, people that are passionate about similar things, I would love to, be able to turn that on. And so anyway, that's pretty cool, because there's a way to be able to do that, and teachers are doing it now. So
just don't do it during your digital minimalism week or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, your day off,
Turn it off
right?
for that.
Your day off, definitely. So two quick ones for me. One of them is Yell Key, URL shorteners, particularly for conference events. I find myself being back in the classroom this year, definitely using my Google Classroom as my primary way to be able to share links. I have a website as well. We do Wonder Links, in our little class meeting time to kick off classes. So I wouldn't use this as much with students that I'm regularly working with, because I'll have other channels. But Yell Link is fun because you can actually limit it if you don't want to have that out there perpetually, and then it'll give you an actual word, a common word. So unlike a randomly generated tiny URL or Bitly, that is a good website. And the other thing I put in there was TinEye, and this is a reverse image search. So actually, when I was out in California, this last summer I went to the Digital Literacy Summer Institute that Renee Hobbs puts on with the University of Rhode Island out in Providence. It's going to be in Chicago this next year. Loved it. It was fantastic. It was a whole week. And so that's a lot of my, passion and new connections for media literacy came from there. Well, there was someone actually in our church who had just shared this little statement, and it was a faith-based statement. But I was like, who is that? And the Twitter account has like 10 followers. It started in January. It's called Share This More. And then you go to it, and it's this pretty outlandish stuff. So anyway, for her students, and this was a hashtag that one of Renee Hobbs, Dr. Hobbs' students was using for their media literacy class. That's how I stumbled upon this, and I ended up doing a little bit of research with because she wanted to find out where a meme that had been shared politically. It's actually one that shows Trump and Melania, if I'm saying her name right, standing in front of Gates, and it was a political meme. But anyway, where did it come from? Found it on the Internet Archive, but then found that by doing a reverse image search. So the point is, doing a reverse image search. Cool. It was kind of fun, and I don't know that for sure. Like it the first things that come up on TinEye, you can do a reverse image search on Google, and so that's a really good thing to know. But it also, I like TinEye as far as the dates. And so it was on a website for sale, like buy this on a mug and a t-shirt, like on the 24th of July, 2018. And then when you looked at the file name or whatever, it was from, this Canadian newspaper. And then it had a date of the 23rd. So,
wow, that's cool. I geek out on that.
And then what I did is I tweeted back and I said, hey, if you all can look into this. Oh, because the website, this is like this is going to be a great blog post, I think. It said, hey, we're founded by so-and-so who's like saving children in Africa. And like, I think they just grabbed this woman's picture and are saying, hey, this is who we are, and where is this coming from? Like, where's the IP address and all that stuff? So most of the time, we're not probably going to do a deep dive into that to like go, where is this coming from? But it was just this perfect thing where I'm like, this picture got shared, and it's a nice picture, but this is one of the things that's happening. And we got the election coming up, right? Groups are trying to get followers and identifying, like, if you are a person of faith, you're a Christian, for instance, and there's, messages here, or if you like cute dog and cat pictures or whatever, or maybe you're pro-gun lobby, right? They will be sharing these things, but then they will utilize that channel to share political things. And so anyway, that Tin Eye is a good
That is
website.
pretty profound.
And the one thing I guess I didn't actually say in the media literacy, this is from the SIFT model of Mike Caulfield that EduQuinn has turned me on to. Emotion. When we get emotionally activated, when we see something, that's a flag, and it's actually a time to try to stop, not immediately hit the share button. And if we have time, and it's actually a good thing to make time, especially before we share something, check it out, because a lot of times people are trying to push our buttons and pull our levers. This is happening on a global level. And this is part of the problem we kind of started talking about with polarization and things like that. Why are we so polarized? In part, it's because there are groups that want us to be polarized, angry at each other. And so that Mike Caulfield, Dave Quinn is EduQuinn on Twitter. And he was the one who, anyway, when I did that workshop last spring, put me on to the SIFT model. And it's media literacy. And man, we all need it. Like our parents do, grandparents,
all of us,
everybody.
Yes.
It's not
everybody,
like
not just kids.
Those meddling kids, those kids are just the source of all the problems. I mean, who's sharing all this on Facebook? It ain't the teenagers. They're not on Facebook. It's older adults. So
you just gave me a whole idea that we need to do a spinoff of Scooby-Doo somehow, where we're running around the mystery machine and revealing the face of the person behind it. It was old man Smithers, at the amusement park. But we need to have a team of us that run around and do this stuff to all of us. That's awesome. I love that idea.
Well, the reason I said that was my daughter with her friend group was trying to figure out what they were going to be for Halloween, because I think they did like Stranger Things last year or whatever, but they didn't have enough characters in Scooby-Doo. And we're like, people can just be the monsters. All they have to do is take off their mask every once in a while and go, those meddling kids, and be perfect.
I love it.
All right. Well, hey, where can people find you when you're not, tuning into the EdTech Situation Room through StreamYard from Chicago?
Okay. Well, you can find me on Twitter at Mr. Hooker, my website, carlhooker.com now. Also my blog at Hooked on Innovation. A couple little tidbits just to drop real quick with your show listeners. And that is, one thing, I will be in Hong Kong in a month. So we'll see how that goes. We've had a lot of things happening over there.
Yeah.
Working with Chinese international schools on a weekend. So I've been told they're going to take care of me, and they've been really good about showing where the protesters are. But I'll be curious to see what it's like over there. I love the global perspective, so getting to see it firsthand.
Have you been there before?
I've not. So
go on the junk tour of the harbor. If you can do an evening harbor tour, I was there about 7 or 8 years ago. Unbelievable.
I won't be wearing a free Hong Kong shirt or anything like that, because I do know it's a communist country, so I got to be careful about that. But very curious to see like what's going on over there, and it's really near and dear to what's happening right now around here too, with comments from LeBron James. You've seen all of it. So anyway, that's one thing. But the other thing I want to announce that I don't think has been released by the press yet, but it's going to come out I think next week, is I'm actually going to be a podcast host myself. So not competing with Wes, because nothing can compete with this. This is a great show, and I love being a part of it again. And I hope to come on again. But we're doing a podcast through ISTE actually called Learning Unleashed, and it'll be a short podcast, just about 15 minutes. Starting out featuring some authors and things like that, but I hope to kind of grow it into something else as it kind of evolves. But excited. I've done a podcast a long time ago, but being on yours and being on and several other folks that I love in the community, it's kind of inspired me to do it. And so when they reached out to me about it, I was like, yes, absolutely, I want to be a part of it. So hopefully I can return the favor and have you on my podcast sometime down the road.
Awesome. Well, I honestly think podcasting has an important role to play in democratic governance, right? The chance to be able to listen, not just have to do a sound bite, be able to articulate things. I think it's a fantastic medium, and it's really just going to continue to grow. So, all right. Well, I am W. Fryer on Twitter. You can find me at speedofcreativity.org periodically. I've got several different posts that have churned in my head since I had this design sprint out in Longmont. You can also check out the curriculum, which I'm sharing for our 5th and 6th grade media and digital literacy classes at EdTech. For like middle division, mdtech.cassidy.org. And we will include those links as well as the other things that Carl and I have talked about tonight on the show links that will be on edtechsr.com. So we want to thank you for tuning in. We went a couple minutes beyond. Thank you so much, Peggy, for sticking with us to the end, and any others. And
love you, Peggy.
Yes, absolutely. Hope that some fall weather is coming your way in Phoenix as well. So until next time, this has been Wes Fryer with Carl Hooker in the EdTech Situation Room, saying stay savvy and stay safe. Until next time.
Bye.